The new Colt Cobra, let's check it out. Samuel Colt was the originator of the double-action revolver, and Colt is known for its really high-quality revolvers and pretty much king when it comes to just finely finished, hand-tuned revolvers. The Colt Cobra was actually introduced in 1950 and production ceased in 1981. There were a number of different models that were introduced, a number of different calibers and barrel lengths. It was an aluminum frame. In 2017, Colt re-released their Colt Cobra. It has a lot of different features than the original alloy frame. This is a stainless steel model, and there's some other advantages with this handgun, but it still retains the smooth trigger and action of what Colt really built its name on. Now, Colt revolvers bring really premium prices. In fact, many can run to the thousands of dollars. So when Colt re-released their Cobra, I really wanted to get a hold of one, and Nate at GunProDeals was gracious enough to send this for the test and evaluation. Guys, there's just something about a double-action revolver that just brings history back to mind. I mean, it kind of connects you with the past, and yet the quality and the modern features make this still a very viable self-defense option. It's funny, I've posted a couple of pictures of this on my Facebook page, and, you know, a lot of people just don't get it. I mean, they don't get that, you know, 6 rounds is a good self-defense option. Yeah, you know, I carry a Glock 19 and a Glock 26 a lot of times, and, you know, it's easy to change those magazines out. And, you know, I don't really want to get into, you know, which is best for concealed carry. But revolvers are still very popular today, and they are being sold in a pretty decent share of the market. Much less than they were, though, in yesteryear. And that's one of the reasons why, though, that Colt reintroduced this revolver. And the Colt Cobra, you know, is just a classic. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and make sure that the gun's unloaded. And it's really easy with a revolver to check because you can see the brass. One of the things that you're going to notice right up front, though, is you pull back on the Colt. On the Smith & Wesson and most of the other designs that are out there right now, you push forward. And really, it's just one of the others, whichever you get kind of used to. Not one is any better than the other, even though I've been shooting Smith & Wessons particularly for a long time. But this is just that really quality look to it that Colt is known for. And the more I've messed with this revolver, the more it's evident. And the Colt Cobra's claim to fame historically was that Jack Ruby used the Colt Cobra to kill Lee Harvey Oswald, who was the one who assassinated JFK. Now, it is a 6-shot revolver, so it's a little larger than some of the 5-shots, and a little bit more heft. And of course, this is a full stainless steel pistol. It weighs about 25 ounces. In fact, I put it on my scale, it was 24.6 ounces. We have a 2-inch barrel, and there are some differences to this, considerable differences. And one of the big ones, of course, is that the originals were an aluminum frame, and this is the stainless frame. It does have a matte finish, which a lot of the original Colts had a really polished nickel finish. And then, of course, the blue finish as well. Now, this is a double single action revolver, and that means that we can pull the trigger and it brings the hammer back, or single action, we can bring the hammer back with a much lighter trigger pull and be able to fire the pistol. So, you know, you have a couple of different modes that way. One of the big things about Colt, though, it's known for its really super sweet trigger. And it's no different than this one. We're going to do double action. It's a really smooth, I mean super smooth trigger pull. Now it's heavier because double action is meant to be heavier, and that's part of the safety of this pistol, or revolver I should say, because there's a lot of semantics about calling this a pistol or a revolver, and I'm going to say both. But just a incredibly smooth trigger. And then when you get to the single action, I mean, it is beautiful. And it's one of those things about taking a revolver out to the range that really kind of changes the way that you look at firearms. To me, it's one of those things where it really brings back the joy and the art and just the quality of a good firearm. Now, the cylinder, bring it out. We do have a shroud here. Now, the early Colt Cobras did not have the shroud. And then they updated it and included a shroud. It just had the ejector rod sticking out, and which could be damaged, and this kind of protects it, gives it a little bit more strength and stability. The workings on this pistol are just so different than a semi-automatic. Another big switch that they made is putting in these fiber optic front sights, and these can be switched out to different colors, and I believe they even have a tritium insert you can put in there as well. And that's a big plus for a small 2-inch revolver, because a lot of times the sights are so minimal it can be difficult to see. And of course, these guns are really made to be shot in a self-defense situation up close and personal. One of the big advantages that a revolver has, though, over a semi-automatic is that it can be shot in a much more enclosed place. In fact, you can have this in a coat pocket and be able to fire it because you don't have the slide action coming back, and so it makes it really just gives you another advantage using a small revolver like this. A lot of guys carry these as backups, as an ankle holster and things like that, if you're carrying a semi-automatic, you know, on your hip. The trigger guard has been enlarged, so it gives you a little more room to be able, especially for gloved hands. The grip is a Hogue overmold grip, and it's, you know, Hogue makes really good grips for revolvers. Now, because this is all steel, you know, when you do take it to the range, it's a lot nicer than shooting, let's say, a Smith & Wesson 442. This is an aluminum frame, and this is the traditional kind of sight. It's just rudimentary sights. Now, I'm not going to go down on this one because I love my 442. This is a great pistol. It's just double action only, and I've had this for years. In fact, this gun I carry every morning out with my daughter. She works at a job where she goes in at like 5 o'clock in the morning. It's still dark, so I walk her out and I just slip this in my back pocket. So yes, it's only 5 shots, which the Colt has 6 shots, and this is heavier. So you know, I may switch out with the Colt. But you know, the one thing about these two pistols, and because Smith and Colt are really some of the biggest names in the revolver world, there's a couple of differences that I just want to point out. And one is with the Colt, the cylinder rotates clockwise. And you'll notice that it goes in the clockwise position. And that's very important to know when you have a revolver, because if you end up looking and seeing which rounds you fired, you know which one's going to hit next. On the Smith & Wesson, it's counterclockwise. And this trigger, it's not smooth really. I mean, it's pretty heavy, and it kind of snaps really quick. Whereas on the Colt, again, look at that, it's just smooth as butter. But now one big difference, and really an advantage with the Smith & Wesson to me, is that when you pull the trigger spring, reset spring, pops it out. With the Colt, when you pull the trigger, the trigger return spring is not as definite. And one of the problems that can cause is that when you're firing it at the range, especially on rapid shot fire, you're pulling, you've got to let that trigger go all the way out to reset. And if you're used to shooting semi-automatics like I am with striker fire or just really quick reset, you can miss it. And in fact, if you watch a little demonstration, okay, I fire it and then I bring it back, and see when I go to pull it again, short stroke it, it doesn't engage. So you've got to be able to let that fully out to be able to fire the revolver. Another thing that Colt changed was the barrel. And the barrel is thinner here, but then it has this area right here that kind of builds up and beefs it up to make it strong. You don't need a heavier barrel, but this just helps to mate it with the frame. It makes it actually easier to load into holsters, and so that's part of the reason why they decided to go that way. Here you can see the rampant Colt on the side, and then of course the Colt logo right on the barrel. Here on the other side, same thing. You got your Colt, Hartford, Connecticut. But you can see the finish, even though it is that matte finish. And I had some comments on Instagram that were talking about that finish. They said, well, you know, I don't know, it looks cheaper. And it does have a little bit of a sheen to it, but I really like the matte finish, and it's still extremely well done. Here again, the cylinder latch comes out. There's some serrations right here to be able to get a good positive grip, and it pulls right out. It's very smooth crane action. Right here at the top of the hammer, also you have serrations to be able to easily grab that and pull the hammer. Now, a lot of times people will take a revolver like this out to the range, and what they end up doing is pulling the hammer back to fire it. It's a much easier, quicker trigger pull, and you're really able to get better accuracy. In fact, when I'm shooting for accuracy, I will shoot it semi-automatic. And a lot of people, if they have time, they'll want to cock it. In fact, a lot of times in movies, you'll see that to where somebody's pointing a gun, and then to get their point across, they just go ahead and cock the pistol. Now, one of the things about that is it makes it really dangerous if you end up not having the need to fire the handgun, because that's a really light trigger pull. And so these are designed to be able to actually shoot in a self-defense situation, double action. And so that means we're going to fire it like this. To get a fast secondary shot, you're going to need just to pull that again. Instead of pulling it, firing it, pulling it, firing it, you might as well have a single action revolver then. And so that's one of the things about these that a lot of people need to practice, the double action. I mean, it is important to continually practice that double action. Here we're shooting it single action, and you can see, you know, I'm able to get a light trigger pull. It makes it really easy. Now here on the double action, you can see that the trigger pull is heavier, it's longer, but if you train that way, you're going to be able to get that front sight in the right spot, and that's the key, is keeping that front sight on target. So we're going to check trigger pull. I have my Lyman trigger gauge from Brownells. Double action. 9 pounds, 7.3 ounces. 9 pounds, 5.1 ounces. And I have been getting that very consistently, just under 9.5 pounds. Let's check single action. £3 pounds, 2.3 ounces. 2 pounds, 12.4 ounces. Really getting that 3 pound mark pretty consistently. And so, you know, it's going to be a really light trigger pull on the single action. Again, on the double action, 9 pounds is not bad for a double action trigger. Now, one thing that Colt also did was they straightened out their trigger just a little bit. It was curled in a little bit more, and they've kind of brought that down, really to help make a consistent trigger pull. There are a lot of grip options for this handgun. I know Hogue has a number of different type, not only this, but also G10. One of the ways to remove your grips right here, and I am going to show you because Colt did retain their leaf spring, their double leaf spring. I'm just going to show you how to take these grips off. It's not a big deal. You can see it just comes right off, and this is the area that it screws into, and there's a groove in your grip. But you see here that double leaf spring, and that's what gives this that really smooth trigger pull. I'm telling you guys, that is just sweet. Grip just goes back again into that groove, finds the right spot, and you just tighten it down. Now, the original Colt Cobras were aluminum frame, and the first ones were 15 ounces. When they added the shroud to it, it moved it up to 16 ounces. The weight on the current Colt Cobra, because of the all-steel frame, is 24.6 ounces according to my scale. At the range, we shot over 400 rounds through the Colt Cobra, shooting standard 38 special and plus P loads. Plus P, little stout, but very manageable with this steel frame. It still has that 2-inch barrel, and you know, it does have some recoil, no doubt. But compared to an aluminum frame, it was very manageable. The size of it, the heft, and the smoothness of the trigger was just excellent.
Well, that's a big difference in that trigger pull between this one and the Smith.
That's smooth.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Way smooth.
Because we're so used to semi-automatics with a very short reset, it's one of the things, if you're not careful, it takes a little getting used to that long reset. You have to really let the trigger go fully out. One of the big things about Colt is that the return spring on the trigger is a little bit lighter than the Smith & Wesson. And I'm used to shooting Smith & Wesson revolvers. The Smith & Wesson seems to kick the trigger out a little easier than the Colt does. If you're not careful, you'll bring that trigger back before it's fully reset. Of course, you know, after getting used to it and shooting it, that's not a problem. But if you, especially if you're used to shooting those semi-automatics and you don't shoot revolvers that often, that's one thing to watch for.
You know what I want to do? I don't want to let it out far enough.
I don't want the reset go out far. Short stroke in the trigger.
Yeah.
You just got to slap it, almost bouncing your finger off the front of the trigger guard.
But for some reason the Smith, isn't the trigger smoother on this?
Yeah.
That Smith is...
It's got a lot heavier trigger return spring, where it really pushes your finger back out.
Yeah.
Where that one's not nearly as heavy.
Now, I really think that the Hoe grip was a great addition for this revolver. It looks good with the stainless, and it really helps mitigate the recoil. It makes it a lot softer shooting, and of course it is very kind of a tactile feel to it, and so it gives you a good solid grip on the revolver. And that fiber optic sight really shows up well at the range. It's one of the things that revolvers have always lacked in, is a decent sight. Of course, these are made for carry, or concealed carry. And so this just really is low to the barrel, and yet it's really easy to see. Rubber Dummies is one of the best training tools on the market, and you get a 10% discount using Suit00 when you click the link down in the description. And I want to thank Robbie from WheatonArms for joining me on range day. It was 99 degrees, and we really had a great time shooting this pistol. Of course, Robbie's big bear paws almost completely covered this handgun, but Robbie always keeps it interesting. The manufacturer suggested retail price is $6.99. On the GunProDeals website, I think they're running $6.13. So just kind of gives you an idea of what these are going for. But I'll tell you what, guys, Colt quality, it's just really worth the additional funds. I mean, these are just excellent. And not only the old vintage Colts, but also the new ones, and hopefully we're going to see more added to the line. And again, I want to thank GunProDeals for sending the Colt Cobra for the test and evaluation and their sponsorship. And I'll tell you, I got in touch with Nate. I said, go ahead and send me a bill, because this one's going to be a keeper. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. The new Colt Cobra, the new Colt Cobra, the new Colt Cobra, the new Colt Cobra. Now, we shot about 400